Hey everyone, my name is Travis Montague, founder and CEO of Holler, and this is Conversation Nation. I'm joined with Kathy Savitt, Managing General Partner of Perch Partners and former CMO of Yahoo and American Eagles. Kathy, thank you for joining. I'm super excited about this conversation. You have incredible experience, and so I'm curious to know more about your background, and then also your thoughts on what's going on at CES.
Well, first of all, Travis, thank you so much for having me. I couldn't be more fired up to be here at CES. Yet again, this is my 30th CES, which leads to my background. Early Nintendo employee, launched about 110 Web 1.0.coms through my firm, which got bought by Interpublic, and then went to Amazon, where I ran marketing, PR, and launched the early content initiatives. Went to American Eagle, where I was CMO, and then went to Yahoo, where I ran media and was their CMO. We started Perch about 3 years ago to help CEOs like yourself solve really tough problems or meet really cool opportunities for global audiences.
So, as you're thinking about the next decade, so we wrap up 2019, 2020 is kicking off, and you're advising CEOs about what they should be thinking about. What are the tech trends that are on your mind as we kick off the next decade?
It's an interesting way that you frame the question, because I think when I first started going to this show, and even in the last 2 or 3 decades, we talked about technology as if it was a strategy, and yet we live in a tech-powered world now. So a certain level of technology and fluency is basically table stakes. So now the way we're advising CEOs to think about it is in terms of what do consumers need and how will technology bridge that gap? So we can say that technology was a chief enabler, like in the early 90s and early 2000s, about driving price and selection for consumers on everything from business goods to consumer goods. And then as we started getting into like 2010 and beyond, it was all about convenience. How can technology make your life more convenient? Get a car by just pushing a button, not have to even answer the doorbell. Someone else is walking your dog. But I think as we go into 2020 and beyond, and I've noticed this theme at CES, and just a lot of the early pundits of looking at what the next decade is going to be, consumers are all about how do I get control back in my life? And which technologies and which companies are going to support me, enable, or empower me to do that. And so I think we're going to see a lot of that in the next decade.
So when you're thinking about control, like consumers wanting to have control of their life, and they're limiting to a certain amount of experiences that help drive that, what are the areas that you think consumers are going to be focused on with respect to getting back control?
So in almost every element, in the quest for convenience, we gave up control of a lot of things. Control of our data, control of our privacy, control of even double clicking and doing due diligence on whether something was true or false. Settling for the first thing in my search function is the right thing to buy. And so we'll start to see control and companies help consumers actually say, this is actually what I want to express from a communication standpoint. This is really what I'm intending or want to buy. This is who's allowed to see what I'm doing, and do I really have to give that up? And most importantly, how do I get sort of my time back to focus on the things that I'm most passionate about?
So what you're talking about, it's really relevant and highly topical given that CCPA is rolling out at the same time. With respect to the changes in how platforms and technology companies are going to be able to access consumer data, do you think that's going to have an impact on the technology companies' ability to innovate, or do you think they're going to have to reinvent themselves?
I think it's going to have an impact on how they monetize, not in how they innovate. And I think sometimes technology companies, in a desire to protect their business models, purposely conflate the two. And actually, if you don't care necessarily about monetizing people's data, the innovations and things that you would do in terms of making a free and open web and allowing people different modes of communication or expression increase, not decrease. And so I look at a company like Holler, which allows people to sort of control in many ways how they want to speak, how they want to communicate without having to opt in to the most conventional or limited things, even on a keyboard. You'll start to see that across the board. And the innovation will come not just from the companies and the technologists, but from those entities partnering with consumers to say, what do you need to really drive your own boat here?
Do you think, so I was speaking to someone earlier and they talked about you're able to prioritize profits and people at the same time. And there's historically, I feel in the last decade, people thought that there's been a mindset of if we extract and exploit as much as we can from consumers without their knowledge, it will ultimately drive more profits. And I think, and one of the things I'm focused on this year is developing, as we grow, a thesis around what the next generation tech company is and how those companies behave. And the way we treat consumers as part of that, our relationship with consumers and the trust that we build with consumers is a big pillar of that. And I do believe that it's going to ultimately land to more profits, because if we, just like consumers select the brands that they want to go to because of the fact that they trust it. Going back to your notion of choice, I think we're going to see that with technology companies as well. Like, I'm not going to use them because I don't trust them where their practices there are.
Totally agree. And so a lot of times, again, we've been trained in the decade of convenience to take the path of least resistance. You know, I go back there, I can't really quit you, as the old movie goes, because you know too much about me, you have so much about me. But there are lots of new daily habits that are occurring as people expand how they use technologies, where if you can develop choice, trust, and a sense of delight, those are sort of the big three for the 2020s. And so I do believe that consumers have shown that they will pay, whether it's on a transactional basis, whether it's a subscription basis, or even if it's a way of partnering with you to co-monetize on certain things, so they feel like they're helping you drive that bus. That's the future of monetization.
So we talked about how this notion of choice is going to drive the technology community. How do you think it's going to, you have an amazing background in marketing, advertising, media. How do you think this is going to shape the way that marketers, brands think about their businesses and their objectives?
First of all, I think there was a book that was written, I want to say it was in 2000, it's maybe in its third edition, called The Clue Train Manifesto. You should read it. Doc Searles is one of the co-authors. It's the de facto Ouija board of what's happening in the future, and they wrote it 20 years ago, literally, where they said, ultimately, we're going to get to the point where technology and the web, and they couldn't have imagined how big mobile was going to be, was going to make customers really drive what their marketing experiences are all about. It's not about just push, and it's not even about pull, it's about collaboration. So how do you engage with me as a brand in a conversation that's so powerful, where I don't have to control it, but I can evolve, react, and participate with you. You not only trust me, but you figure out how I can be value added and make your life better, easier, more delightful, more aspirational. So that's one piece. Another thing that I think is kind of interesting is I think most companies are going to have to become media companies, meaning that the notion of producing, one of the things that you're doing is you're producing your own conversations about things that really matter. And we're swimming in content right now. And until we get to a point where you're not competing against a lot of things that's quite frankly just drivel, great content gets lost. And so how do companies become media companies so that they can distribute, relate, and engage with customers about things and conversations they want to have, not only during the product, but globally as well across all platforms?
So that's interesting you say that. Let's talk about messaging as a channel for a second. So 63% of all content that's shared between online is happening through messaging environments. And so it really is interesting to me, the fact that when you look at the things that marketers have done historically in the messaging space, it's been really limited to maybe chatbots for customer services or things that kind of just scratch the surface. So when we're thinking about building that relationship with consumers, what do you think the opportunity might be for marketers when it's in the context of messaging as a channel, a platform, a medium?
Well, first of all, you have to create something so compelling, so engaging, and importantly, useful to help me take back control of my life that I'm going to opt in. We see a lot of blowback when you start spamming me, you meaning the global you, spamming me on my phone, I turn off and I get upset. However, if you're enabling me to learn something new, be more powerful in what I'm doing, delight me, then bring it.
Yeah.
And so it's part about establishing that trust relationship in the product and then taking it to the device or to the distribution channel that manages most of that customer. Sometimes, or that consumer, it will be mobile. Certainly within different demographics, anytime you're traveling. But we're also starting to see that across a lot of other channels and things that you haven't even thought about yet. Co-marketing partnerships, screens that are out of home. How do we work with you through conversations and advocacy on campuses, at workplaces, etc.? What's old is new right now because we're all about authentic engagement, and that really is a theme for 2020.
I love what you said there. Oh, what was old is now new.
Yep.
Like it's funny. We went from a world where we're like audience-based targeting, audience-based targeting,
Yep.
and then one of the big trends that we've seen coming back into 2020 is contextual targeting, like context-based advertising.
Yes.
And what they realize is going fully programmatic is not having the impact that it was once considered to have, because relevance and context matters still, and creativity.
Absolutely. I was a little bit of a pariah probably 5 to 10 years ago. I remember again sitting here at CES and sort of being the naysayer. Not that programmatic didn't have its place, but it had absolutely no contextual relevance to consumers. So essentially brands were buying eyeballs, and sometimes not even verified eyeballs. And so if you looked at the resonance and the understanding of what a product or a service actually meant to a consumer after a programmatic campaign, while awareness may have moved, understanding, engagement, and preference never moved. And we're starting to see sort of the second order consequences of that 5-7 years later.
Awesome. Well, I have a fun question for you.
Okay, I'm excited.
Yeah.
They're all fun.
What was the last emoji that you used?
The last emoji, honestly, I used the poop emoji. I was told I just spent holiday vacation. I have 5 daughters, ages 16 to 30, and one of my daughters had to leave early for a work thing, my 30-year-old, and she said she had to take an earlier plane, and the only thing I could think of saying was poop. So that's what I said.
That's awesome. I always ask that question because there's always an awesome story behind the last emoji used. So thank you for sharing that.
It's embarrassing, but it's true.
No, it's authentic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. I know you have a busy CES ahead of you. This was a great conversation for our viewers, and I hope you have a great start to your year.
Anything, anytime, let me know. It was fun talking to you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year as well.